This is Robert Winter. Thanks for joining me. I'm here with an excerpt from my new book, Asylum. Asylum is the story of Hernan Portillo, who is from El Salvador. He came to the United States illegally, and as the story begins, he's living in Provincetown with his cousin Rudy. If you read September, you might remember Rudy. He was partnered with a man named Gerald Nimble, who caused a lot of trouble in that story. At this point in the book, Gerald Nimble has just come into the restaurant where both Rudy and Hernan are working, and he's demanded that Hernan come out and talk to him. Hernan's stomach churned as Rudy led him out to the front of the restaurant. In Spanish, Rudy whispered, "I'm sorry, Nan. Just talk to him. Maybe that's all he wants." Hernan shook his head tightly. Rudy, of all people, should know this Gerald Nimble pendejo wanted more than conversation, and wouldn't take no for an answer. It was all happening again. He was being dragged before a man who wanted to make Hernan his property, just like in the dilapidated Wayhouse, when the thugs had reached out, not for the girl pretending to be his sister, but for him. Rough hands wrapped in his shirt as they dragged him up. The other chickens huddled on their beds in the dormitory and looked away, relieved the handlers hadn't come for them or their loved ones, only for Hernan, who meant nothing to any of them. Even his sister dropped her head forward and rocked her thin body to avoid his eyes. The thugs led him out and up the stairs to the room with the double doors. Inside, he was waiting for Hernan. "It'll be fine," Rudy said uncertainly, in a low voice, as he slung an arm across Hernan's shoulder. Hernan shuddered and fought the urge to run, as Nimble watched them approach. The predatory look in his flinty gray eyes was one Hernan had seen too many times in his young life, from men who coveted Hernan for themselves. Nimble ignored, or perhaps thrived, on Hernan's humiliation, as Rudy dragged him out to parade like a piece of meat. That's not fair. Rudy doesn't want to do this. He knew, but it didn't help. Despair threatened to swallow him. No matter how hard he fought to survive, someone always waited to pull him down into inky black depths. Even when he resisted, he failed, like he'd failed Albert, Andrea, and even Isela. Nausea roiled his belly, but he kept his gaze squarely on Nimble's face. He tried to blot out everyone else in the restaurant. He wanted to look away, but that sign of weakness would make him appear even more vulnerable. "Hernan, how delightful you look today," Nimble said, in a voice oozing with oil and possessiveness. "Though you should keep your hair short and let people see your lovely eyes. Thank you for coming out to say hello." Hernan refused to answer, but Rudy spoke. "He came out like you wanted. Now he needs to get back to the kitchen." Nimble sighed theatrically. "Hernan, I don't know why you insist on wasting your time here. I have a big, beautiful kitchen. I've told you, come cook for me. You'd be so much more comfortable living in my house than wherever it is Rudy is staying these days." Rudy snapped. "I'm where I landed when you threw me away." Nimble rolled his eyes. "You were always so dramatic. Our affair had simply run its course, and you needed to move on." "I did move on when you brought in that Troy person." "Ah, Troy, so willing to learn. I miss him still." Rudy nodded furiously. "Yes, I heard about it. You caught him with another man and had him arrested for stealing." "Troy did steal from me. The police still haven't found that antique cufflink set he took. I suppose I'm lucky you spared me that humiliation." "All in all, you were quite reasonable, Rudy. Now, piss off, would you? I'd like to talk with Hernan, and you're giving him a bad impression of me." Hernan spoke for the first time. "Believe me, I don't need Rudy's help to see what kind of man you are." Nimble's mouth tightened. "That's unjust. I can be a very good friend. I was generous with Rudy, after all. Clothes, vacations, the finest restaurants. I seem to recall a Rolex watch when I was swept up in romance at the beginning." With a grunt, Rudy said, "Sure, generous. As long as I wore exactly what you wanted me to wear, said what you wanted me to say, had sex with you the way you wanted to be—" Nimble cut him off with a hand gesture. Now, no disclosure of pillow talk. That was quite clearly a stipulation in our agreement when I let you keep that very same Rolex." Rudy flushed, but said no more. Hernan shook his head slowly. "You're wasting your time. I don't sleep with men." Nimble tilted his head. "Then you simply haven't had the right incentives. In the end, flesh is flesh. You'll find there's more to me than a large bank account and a large house." He leered at Hernan. "Have dinner with me, and we'll discuss what might entice you into my bed." "No. Are we done here? I have to get back to work." Nimble's face hardened. "A quick refusal to a business proposition is tiresome. It simply indicates the other party fails to understand what he might gain or what he might lose." Hernan's jaw ached because he clenched it so tightly. When he flicked a glance at Rudy, his cousin was pale. Claude is coming to dinner at my house Sunday evening, Nimble continued, and his thin lips curled at either side. I can imagine at least 2 ways our dinner conversation might trend. Ernan, if you were there with me and consented to stay afterwards for a deeper discussion, we'd have a lovely chat about books or art or whatever local gossip Claude is interested in. On the other hand, if I'm alone, I could see a warning about hiring practices, perhaps the advisability of Claude taking a fresh look at those he employs. Ernan felt his cheeks burn, and Rudy was chewing the corner of his mouth. Nimble could cause great difficulty for both him and Rudy. Losing their jobs at Veranda would be the least of it. Ernan couldn't do what Gerald wanted. He could not submit to this man. But if he didn't... Nimble seemed to like the expression he found in Ernan's face. He said, "Well, I've kept you long enough today. I'll expect you at 8:30 Sunday evening. Rudy can give you the address." Dismissed, Ernan turned to walk back to the kitchen. Only then did he spot the handsome man he had pulled from the harbor the night before, sitting with the blonde guy. In the daylight, his skin looked like porcelain. The afternoon sun brought out rosy undertones in his cheeks and glints of copper in his hair. They were close enough to Nimble's table they might have heard the entire exchange. The stranger's blue eyes burned into Ernan's, full of what looked like anger and concern and some other emotions Ernan didn't recognize. He blushed even more, focused on the ground, and slunk to the kitchen. I hope you'll pick up a copy of Asylum and find out what that stranger with the blue eyes does to help Ernan avoid the trap that Gerald Nimble has laid. And if you like the book Asylum, I hope you'll consider leaving a review for it. Thank you very much for listening. Take care.